And my whole idea is to be a bridge between my Black community and the rest of the community so that information and opportunities can flow back and forth. My name is Carolyn J. Mason, the J for Jean. Um, I'm retired, but I work. Um, I'm a Sarasota native. I have 3 children, 14 grandchildren, and 5 great-grandchildren. My mother died when I was 14, but she always taught my brother and me. I have a brother who's 2 years younger, so we were the last 2 children at home. We have a sister who's 16 years older. So we were the 2 youngest, and we were the last 2 at home. But she always instilled in us that we had to be better because of the color of our skin. We had to be better. People were going to expect things of us, but we had to rise above those expectations. And she said, nobody owes you anything. Everything you get in life, you're going to have to work for, and you're going to have to work hard for it. So I did. I am. It was very interesting. When I grew up, it was extremely segregated to the point where there were colored and white schools, with Booker being the schools for all of Sarasota County's Black children. I lived during a time when public transportation mandated that I ride at the back of the bus because of the color of my skin. There were stores on Main Street that we couldn't go in because of the color of our skin, and those that we could go in had colored and white bathrooms and colored and white water fountains. An act was enforced so that my senior year I had to start at a new school. Well, they used what is now Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Way as a boundary. And those students who lived on the south side, this side of MLK, were assigned to Sarasota High School. And those on the north side were assigned to Riverview High School. Now, I thought it was very, and I still think it was very traumatic, because think about your senior year in high school. You are about to embark on adulthood. That should be the best time for a student. Well, it wasn't, because now they threw 2 groups of students together without any explanation. We had lived separately all our lives, and now you're going to put us together, and what do you expect? We didn't know what to expect. And it was traumatic because there were 1 or 2 Black students per classroom. And so I felt alone and actually frightened. I didn't know what to expect because it was so separate, and we were treated so differently when we went to other places. I don't know if, well, you all are too young to, you may have heard about this, but at one time we couldn't go to the beaches. We could not go to Lido. We could not go to Siesta. There was a colored beach in Sarasota County. It was Casperson Beach, which is just a little south of Venice. That was the colored beach. If we wanted to go to the beach, that's where we had to go. And that meant on a Sunday after church, all afternoon. I wouldn't change anything else in my life because I may not have the experiences I had, and therefore I wouldn't learn the lessons that I learned. When I worked for the city of Sarasota, I went to a production at the Florida Studio Theater of Hi Hat Hattie. And a coworker who was also my next door neighbor and I went. And Hi Hat Hattie was about a black woman. And we got in the theater on a Saturday afternoon, and you know, theaters are dark even in the daytime when you're watching a production. But at intermission, we were the only black people there, and we're thinking, Hattie McDonald was in Gone with the Wind. And so she had developed a great following among people, but especially black people. So where were they? And so we left the theater at the end of the production. We went over on Main Street to get something at a drugstore, and we met Mr. Johnny Hunter, who had just purchased Tempo News. And so we both like jumped him and said, we just went to this production and there were no black people and blah, 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 blah. And so an opportunity arose for me to become a member of the Sarasota County Arts Council. And I happily joined their board, and I said to the executive director, I want you to use me as a bridge because I know there are talented black people in this community. There are all these theaters, so we need to connect them. So I want to be that connection. And that's how it started. I've been on the board of the opera, the Ringling Museum's Education Committee back in the day, Florida Studio Theater. I've just been, but I learned a lot. I learned a lot. I could take then what I learned to my community, and I could be that connection. And so I was on the board of the Sarasota Ballet when they started Dance the Next Generation way back when. And it was as much of a learning experience for me as it was for those arts organizations. I've been on the board of the Women's Resource Center, Girls Incorporated, the Boys and Girls Club, but I've learned a lot, and I've been able to be that bridge, but I'm getting older. It's time for y'all to be bridges. Who inspired me? Well, when I was elected to the city commission, a friend, a very dear friend of mine, said, Carolyn, I think you should do this. Reverend Jerome Dupree wasn't going to run again. And since I was so active in the community, she said, I think you have the background to do this. Well, I wasn't interested. I really wasn't. But she was a very dear friend. And so it's not to hurt her feelings. I said, I'll consider it. Well, then she had me speak with Nora Patterson, who was formerly a city commissioner, but at that time had moved on to the county commission. And so I went and I spoke with Nora, and she knew I had worked at the city. I worked at City Hall for 10 years. So I knew the lay of the land. I knew where the skeletons were buried. And she said, go to a meeting and sit in the audience. You've been on the other side, because I used to do minutes for several boards. advisory boards for the city. She said, "You've been on that side. Sit on the audience side and see how the commission conducts their business and see if you would be interested in that." And I did that a couple of times and I thought, I can do that. And so I told my friend I would run, and I did, and I was elected. The color of my skin seemed always to be a problem for other people. Wasn't a problem for me because it was always the color of my skin. But once when I was mayor, I had an incident occur where I was presenting 3 keys to the city at a celebrity tennis match on Longboat Key. And the security guard kept coming over to me saying, "Oh, I'm just looking at your badge." Well, we had on big blue, bright blue badges on a lanyard around your neck so you could stand over there and see that I had the right credentials. But it was offensive to me, and my friend who was with me, a white female, was more offended. And the security guard did it 3 times. And on one side of me was my friend, and the other side was the mayor of the town of Longboat Key. And he was so embarrassed. Well, I had to leave the next day to go out of town to a conference, and the newspaper called me. And they said, "What are you going to do about the way you were treated at the Longboat Key Club?" And I said, well, I wrote a letter and I sent to the management of the club to tell them how offended I was. And they said I must have been imagining things because that couldn't have happened. Well, the mayor was on one side of the town of Longboat Key and my friend was on the other side. And I was in the middle. How could it not have happened? And people who lived in the Longboat Key Club started to write letters to the editor. I thought, we haven't come as far as I thought we had. So I think it's important because the question I had was, why can't I be the mayor of the city? I wasn't elected mayor. I was elected as a commissioner and selected by my peers on the commission as mayor. So what was the problem? And the things that I went through, I count them as speed bumps, and the thinking behind speed bumps is that they're designed to slow you down. You can get over them, but you have to slow down and take a measured approach to crossing it, but you can get across it. So I had some speed bumps in life. The advice I would give is this: know who you are and what you want, and stay true to who you are and what you want. Don't let anybody move you off that needle.
I was born and raised in Tampa, Florida, in East Tampa, the Belmont Heights, Ybor City area. During that time, we had the village mentality attitude for our neighborhood, for the African American neighborhood. For generations, that has been the mentality for a number of African American families and communities. And what that means is that everybody in the neighborhood were a part of your extended family. One thing that they did emphasize, the village, there were 2 things: education and excellence in and outside of the classroom was required. And that whole extended family, mom, neighbors, pastors, teachers, took part in that growing and development. The idea behind the mentality is that love and support and protection for the children could be found in your neighborhood, in your community. And everybody had a chance to take part in it. It wasn't just mom or dad or grandma. My next door neighbor had the right to discipline me once they heard if I did anything wrong at school, which I never did, by the way. Because my mom was a teacher's aide, the word would spread quickly because everyone in the community knew each other. My village inspired me in any and every kind of way. My mom and my dad worked, I don't know how many jobs. I hardly ever saw my dad. I saw him on Sundays, and we'd see him on Friday nights when he would get off one of those other part-time jobs that he had. That was our big night when Dad came home on Friday night, and we can watch Shock Theater and eat popcorn and all of this together with Dad. But then early Saturday morning, he was gone again working, and my mom did the same thing. And I watched my mom. The way that she persevered, she was, when I began to head to college, my mom was working on getting her college degree. She became a teacher, and she was a teacher's aide all of those years prior to that, but she also was a cosmetologist. She played the piano in churches around the community for years at a number of churches. She also did a lot of service work in the community. She started a prison ministry for the young men who were coming home who couldn't find jobs. She started a ministry where she addressed some of the issues along with my aunt, who was an activist in the city. What I did was I modeled wanting to be like the leaders that I saw in our community. The coaches, the teachers in our community, the business owners, the pastors. You always wanted to be like those. We also had a newspaper. It's called the Florida Sentinel. And so you would read the paper and learn about some of the community leaders, and you wanted to be a model. And I think that's where I got my roots in terms of just watching these models, and not only just my parents, but like I said, there were other community leaders as well, including members, even my coaches, even my basketball and football and track and baseball coaches. There was someone always who kind of inspired me to want to be a leader and to give back to the community. Well, first I was an educator, social studies teacher at Booker Middle for a few years. And in my classroom, I taught the subject areas that were required, geography, history, all of that, economics, and I did the same thing at high school. But in my classrooms, I required students to make a plan for life, because I knew learning about George Washington today may not help them with a job tomorrow. They needed to know where they were going and how they were going to get there. So I required college and career planning. And in doing so, I started to notice the inequities. Once I took on that position in the College and Career Resource Center and built it, I started to learn about the inequities that I noticed in just the whole process in college access. Initial efforts were with college admissions. But then I started to turn my attention to careers as well, knowing that college may not be the end-all, be-all for all students. But I noticed that there were some limitations to certain students, certain demographics to get into certain schools. I noticed that at our school, we sometimes couldn't get the Ivy Leagues to come and visit us like they did some of the other schools in the area. I noticed that some of the scholarship organizations in the area didn't come and do presentations like they did at other schools. And I just made it my business to try to address them and try to speak to them and show them, more than anything else, just the quality young people that we had over there in the school, even though it's located in the northern part of the county. And supposedly, the students there don't do well. They found out that that wasn't true once they started coming on campus. And then after that, it all started to roll along well. And I'm really proud of Sarasota County. The growth that has taken place, the things that I've seen happen over the years. we've done a good job impacting and addressing diversity, inclusion, and equity in our schools. Working alongside great educators here in Sarasota County at Booker High School, at Booker Middle School, working with other teachers in the community, the great district leaders, the principals that I've had. It's been a privilege to serve with them, and so there were many, many rewarding experiences that I've had. But the ones that, honestly, sadly, the ones that impacted me the most were the ones where I realized that I did not impact some students the way that I wanted and needed to. And sadly, some of those incidences ended in tragedy for some of the students, family dysfunction, students making the wrong decisions and ending up with life-altering consequences. So those stick with me today, even though I'm retired. Those stick with me more than the hundreds, probably thousands of successful students that have gone on. You always remember the ones that, you didn't help, you didn't save. For a moment here in the last few years, I would have said I'm totally impacted by the direction that you see the country going in now. And for just a moment, especially when I retired and right after I retired in November of 2022, I was concerned. I was concerned. It just seems like we're going backwards. There seems to be a leadership vacuum. Leaders don't seem to speak truth and be honest, and also have compassion for everybody. And then I thought about all of the students that I've worked with over the years. And it's been really, really impactful that they call. Some of them have children now. Some of them are teachers, but many of them are leaders throughout their communities wherever they are, this community and other states, and even out of the country. They have high-level positions in government and other things like that. And I thought, wait a minute, there is hope. So what impacts me now is your generation, that there's hope, that you will get it done, that you will finish the job. I've learned that failure is not final, it's not fatal. Get up when things get rough, get going, keep going. And I've learned that from those students that I've seen who overcame many more obstacles than I ever had growing up. Yours is a resilient generation. I'm telling you, you impress me all the time. The students that I've met with, they've been so impressive. And I tell them all the time, you inspire me to want to keep going and keep doing what I do. And I found that kind of hope is really never going to die. Love, being compassionate and being kind, it's always silent. It's always a lot more silent than the noise of lies and hate. That's the loudest thing you hear. That's all you see today. And behind the scenes, I believe quietly, I believe that our young people are going to make the change that hopefully is necessary, hopefully in my lifetime.